Oh, and Bill joins us now. Good morning. What a lovely film. I watched this yesterday. What a lovely celebration of life. I really, really enjoyed this movie. Tell us a little bit about Living and why did you decide to take part in this film?
Well, everything about it was attractive. It's written by Kazuo Ishiguro, the Nobel Prize-winning novelist. It was suggested by him. It was his idea. And it's produced by Stephen Woolley, who I've worked with, the great English film producer, who I've worked with now 3 times. It's a great role. And it is, I mean, you know you're in a hit when you start getting texts from people you were at school with. And people you haven't heard from for 1,000 years, you know. And also...
And what are they saying in the texts?
Well, my favourite thing is, we can't get in. That's my favourite.
Well, that's nice to hear, isn't it?
Yeah,
so it's full.
Or the cinema's packed. Those are the magic words.
So was it a Japanese film originally?
It was originally a short story by Tolstoy, which was adapted into a Japanese film by the great Japanese director Kurosawa, and we've transposed it from 1953 Tokyo to 1953 London.
And Mr. Williams. I love the fact that everyone calls everybody by Mr. such and such. I think we should do that more often, Mr. O'Leary.
Thank you, Miss Hammond.
Thank you. I absolutely loved it. But I know the film was set literally 4 years before you were actually born. Did it bring back memories of a time?
Well, it's all a bit long ago, but I mean, it's funny when you watch old footage, black and white footage, and you think, well, that looks like a long time ago, and then you realise you were there. And I would have been wearing those shorts, which were everybody had to wear in those days. But I can remember certain things. I remember, you know, but I mean, you know, I was very young, and my memory's not great. But I remember getting a coronation mug in 1953, which I think was the first thing that I ever thought belonged to me. You know, somebody gave me this mug. I have a vague picture in my mind of being handed this thing, and but I don't. And I remember, you know, I remember playing a lot of football.
I think it captures that conformity really well, and the sort of the coming out and the echoes of the Second World War are there, right, really stark. But at the same time, it's obviously before the 60s, where the liberation started and so forth. So, and I guess people are so grateful that the war had just finished that to get back into any routine and so forth, it captures that really well, I think.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's always given a bad press, the 50s, but actually, and it was just after the war, which was a very progressive time in this country. It's when you got the National Health Service, you got the trade union movement. They began to educate the sons and daughters of the working class, which hadn't been a thing before. You know, so it was probably one of the most progressive times in our history. And the conformity, one of the weirdest things is the bowler hat and how that caught on. It's such a weird. Everybody wore a bowler hat, and it's such a weird object. It's built like a crash helmet, so if a house brick fell from a very great height, you'd be fine. You know what I mean? It's a
Was
weird.
that the point of it, to protect your head?
I don't know, but it would do. Honestly, you'd be all right in a war.
The strange thing is how quickly it came and then died out. So no one wears a bowler hat. I remember interviewing Mickey Flanagan, the sort of East End comedian, and Mickey was a fish porter, a porter in Old Billingsgate Market in the 80s, and he said it was the weirdest time because you'd get kind of guys coming in with massive mobile phones, and then old school gents going into the city with the bowler hats, and he said it was that sort of like change in styles was so interesting.
But the film seems to inspire people. It's not, you know, I mean, it is about somebody who gets a very bad diagnosis, but the feeling that people get when they leave the cinema seems to be one of being galvanised and being determined to sort of do things and get things done. It's about a man who spent his whole life arranging for things not to happen. In other words, procrastination, a big institution dedicated to procrastination, and then he gets a wake-up call and has to make the most of the rest of his life. And that seems to be the part that inspires people when they come out. And the film's kind of caught fire because we've been on the festival tour and we've been invited to Venice and Telluride and Toronto and London and San Sebastian and Sundance. It's been, you know, it's really caught fire.
I mean, people, how do you feel when you start hearing things like Oscars and things like that? Do you kind of just ignore that, or do you kind of like... quietly listen to it?
Well, you know, I mean, apparently, I mean, I'm quite often congratulated on the Oscar that I haven't already got. Cab drivers.
Really?
I mean, a couple of cab drivers have said, I was very pleased about the Oscar, Bill. That was, you know, and a bloke came up to me in Toronto and said, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He said, what's it like when somebody hands you an Oscar? I said, well, you know, if I'd got one, I'd tell you. But
just go with it.
So I just figure I've got, you know, I didn't even have to turn up.
Got one already.
I didn't have to turn up. I was already got one.
Does your part resonate with you and your memories of your father?
Yeah, I'm not playing my father, but my father was a similar kind of character in as much as he was a very decent, very smart and straightforward man, and he was very modest in his personal style, which was the kind of it was the requirement then, and he would be discreet in his expression of any kind of emotion or anything. But he wasn't a cold man. He wasn't, you know, it was just that was the way of the world then. And I know that all that repression is probably seen by the psychiatric establishment as deeply unhealthy, but actually it's also kind of heroic in a certain context, and it's kind of funny too. And from an acting point of view, you have to, because you're not allowed to virtually express anything, you know, and so therefore you have to express quite big stuff with not very much, so it gets to be quite interesting.
Yeah. I read that lovely quote of you when you said you were with your father when you were a kid, and you used to sit down and he'd have like dripping on toast, and you'd have syrup on toast, and that was your thing together.
Deeply healthy. He'd have bread and dripping, which was a thing then, you know. It was all the for people who don't know, it was all the you know, the drippings from all the roasts that you'd had every Sunday. We used to keep it in the larder. It was like a glass thing, and it would be like, you know, when you get different sands at the seaside, it was like that. It was like different coloured sands, and I'd have golden syrup and lots of butter. That was kind of our thing, you know.
So lovely.
And look at you, you look so good.
Well, thank you.
That's all he eats.
You look so good.
Well, I'm still here.
We've got Christmas around the corner. We've got to talk about Love Actually. You must get sick of people still talking about it.
No, I'm never sick of people talking
not?
about Love Actually. Love Actually was obviously a very big and important thing for me, and it changed the way I went to work, and I'll never ever get bored hearing about it. And people are very, you know, it's become who knew that it would enter the language in that way? And people have used it for all sorts of purposes to get them through dark times, and obviously every Christmas. So it's and it's everywhere you go. There's nowhere in the world, I don't think, where people don't watch it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love it. Can we show a clip?
Of course we can.
Oh, let's have a look.
Flaming hell.
Hi, kids. Here's an important message from your Uncle Bill. Don't buy drugs. Become a pop star and they give you them for free.
And I do believe it's a commercial break.
That's a great line.
If I get an obituary, that'll be the kids used to run after me in my district. They used to run after me shouting it.
Brilliant. Bill,
Well,
thanks
we're really
so much.
excited. Living, it's in cinemas now. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Bill.
Pleasure.